Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Pac-Mountain Pulse, a Mountain West Connection podcast. I'm your host, Derek Raridan, and with me again is Dominic Gutierrez. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. How are you, Derek?
Doing all right. A little bit later this time around. It's a little bit past my bedtime in a little bit, but still. Jokes aside, though, it's been a fun week, and I'm looking forward
Yeah,
to seeing what we talk about today. So I know you just got back from vacation. How was that?
it was good. Much needed time off, but I'm glad to be back. So
On the chopping block again, right before fall camp too. So I'm looking forward to this.
yeah.
So, alrighty. So, welcome back, everybody. Appreciate you joining us again. On the docket today, we are not just doing a Mountain West or Pac-12 exclusive episode. We're finally doing them together, actually, as the podcast suggests. Um, so, the big stuff we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about comparisons because everybody loves to talk about how the American is compared to the Pac-12 conference, to the Mountain West conference, to every other conference. So, we're going to talk a little bit about which conference we think is the best heading into 2026, especially football wise. We're going to talk a little bit about week 0 because, like I just mentioned, fall camp just started up for some programs who are doing week 0 matchups, and then next week is everybody else, to my knowledge. Uh, so we'll talk a little bit about week 0, some games we're looking forward to, all that kind of stuff. And then we'll wrap it up because last week, the Pac 12 and Mountain West, or within the last week or two, announced new brackets for their basketball conference tournaments. So we're going to get into
Mhm.
those, discuss a little bit and our opinions about that. So, but without further ado, let's get into the first topic, which will be our comparisons. So, first things first, we had an article drop on Mountain West Connection by our managing editor, Mike Whitman. So, shout out Mike for the article comparing last year's Mountain West to the American, and he went over a bunch of stuff like head to head, winning top team winning percentages, Power Four records, all that kind of stuff. And the biggest kind of takeaway was how dominant the American was in those brackets compared to the Mountain West.
Mhm.
Obviously, now the majority of the schools have that were part of that conversation have now split into the Pac-12 and Mountain West, and so the big talking point, which I'll let Dom speak on first, is which conference out of the three that I just mentioned is heading into this next season the best, and what will it take for the other two to bounce back afterwards?
I mean, I'll kind of start opposite of you. Kind of starting with the one that needs the most work, which I'm going to say is the Mountain West, purely because of A, the teams that it lost, and B, just I guess just more of a comparison from last year, which is what Mike kind of put in his article, but specifically looking at how the current Mountain West teams did last year. Um, a lot of them didn't do bad. You know, you're going to have going into this year, you're going to have UNLV among the top. You're going to have New Mexico among the top. You're probably going to have Hawaii among the top. You'll get some newcomers like NDSU up there. Um, but in terms of those teams last year, and like I said, it's hard to compare when a lot of the teams they were competing against are no longer in the conference. Um, but if we're comparing strictly the conferences strength wise between these three, the Mountain West is the weakest just because of they are the ones who had to rebuild the most. You know, the Pac-12 took the best of the best, so to say, of the Mountain West, and then the American is. I mean, they are arguably one of the better, if not the best, Group of Six conferences in the nation in terms of football. Um, I mean, if it wasn't for some late season blunders by Memphis, I feel like they obviously would have been in the CFP instead of the alternative. So, but I mean, you still saw teams like Tulane get in there. You know, they have a lot of uh, more success, I would say, in terms of more teams being more successful among the top of the standings. So I think going into this season, it's going to be really between the American and you could say the Pac-12. I think just because of the teams they took in, and then their additions of schools like Texas State, who have shown success coming over from the Sun Belt. They're projected to do pretty well. Obviously, you have Washington State and Oregon State, who were originally part of that Pac-12 group that was a Power Four or Power Five conference at that time. So they already have experience at that level. And then obviously schools like Boise State, they're kind of one of those borderline teams. They could make a jump into a power conference at some point. They obviously have CFP experience now. Um, so I think that you're going to see a lot more of a rivalry between those two conferences. Um, the Mountain West, it just they need time to grow into it, I guess, if that makes sense. There's just they have a lot more newcomers and a lot more teams that now have to take the reins. And we talked about it in the first episode, how I mentioned how you're so used to having a school like Boise State constantly in the running, so now you need someone else to kind of take that number one spot. So I think this year is just the conference finding who that's going to be, or who the couple teams are that's going to be consistently fighting for that. And I feel like once you kind of have those levels established within your conference, and then you'll have a better idea of how they're going to stack up against everybody else.
Oh, 100%. And I think you're right on the money with it. If I were to rank the group of six, it would
Mm-hmm.
probably go American, Pac-12, Mountain West, and then probably go the MAC, and then Sun Belt. And those two can flip flop depending on who's doing the best and who's vying for that CFP spot in the group of
Mm-hmm.
six.
Yeah.
And then sadly, Conference USA at the bottom, but
Right.
you know they do their best. I know there's a couple schools that definitely should pop up in them, but still.
Yeah.
Um, so that's no shade. I'm not trying to throw shade at any conferences.
They
But
all have their benefits, but it's just obviously a lot. It's more success wise. Like just some of these, you're just not going to really see some of these cool schools among the top of the rankings, which is fine. But it's just you're expecting it. It's you could look at the same thing when it comes to the Power Four conferences. Like they're all obviously good, but are we really going to compare the SEC to the ACC? Yeah,
when it
like
comes to head to head, I 100%
yeah,
agree. Yeah.
yeah.
And so that's what's going to be my point is when you take the head to head stuff over just last year alone, I mean, you look at last year the American had multiple schools in double digits.
Hmm.
UNLV was the only one in double digit wins last year.
Yeah.
They had multiple schools that were 9-4, but
Hmm.
what was it? It's two of those four left
Yeah.
for the Pac-12. And
Hmm.
then again, like you said, you got Boise, you got which was the perennial CFP group of 6 school. That was the first one. And then you had last year where you have Tulane coming in from the American. You have Memphis who shout out the boys from Nevada, by the way, who transferred to Memphis. Y'all kicked
Yep.
butt, by the way. It was like Brendan Lewis and Cortez, right? Cortez Braham.
Yeah. Yep. Those two
Love.
were, and I want to say there was one more. Forgive for
I want to say
blanking on
so
the
too.
name, but there was three of them, I believe.
Yeah, but either way, they kicked butt. I loved watching them play over there. Sucks it
Hmm.
wasn't at Nevada, but still.
Yeah.
Um, but no. So like when you take into consideration how much they had in terms of top tier success, in terms of bowl game success, because I think the Mountain West won like 2 games last year, and it's in its bowl game run, um, and all this other stuff. It just wasn't a good record. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
So
They
it's
went
like
two
there's
and
got to be
five in bowl
yeah,
games. They had seven make it, obviously, but yeah, compared to
exactly.
American, they went 5-4.
Right. So it's like it's just a matter of American was just so beefy and they had so many teams that realistically could have won the conference.
Hmm.
So last year was a hodgepodge of 4 different schools, but realistically there was like two favorites and that was Boise State and UNLV.
Right.
So it's just like there needs to be like you said there needs to be there needs to be new perennial powers in the Mountain West.
Yeah.
And I think that's where like I said same 4 schools you mentioned, but I don't think the gap is as big as people think it is, though.
Right.
I think, and of course, it's season 1 of the new Pac-12, new Mountain West. You're
Hmm.
gonna have trial and error. You're gonna have all these different things happen, but if you can steer the boat, both as the Pac-12 and the Mountain West, towards like getting that reputation back, getting into that scheme of like, hey, yes, we're a mid-major conference now, even though the Pac-12, a lot of fans in the Pac-12 say they're Power Five again, which if they can, great. I love that for them. Just right now, you need to prove yourself. So we're gonna
Yeah.
hold off on that on the podcast. Um, but so you're a good mid-major conference. Now it's time to prove whether you're Power Five, whether you're top tier mid major, or maybe you falter and you have a couple hiccups here and there. You have the success right there for you, but it's not as if the other conferences aren't vying for those spots as well. And so, right, going into this season, I 100% agree, American top tier. But
Hmm.
where like some people say like, oh, here's the American, here's the Pac-12, here's the Mountain West. I kind of view it, here's the American, here's the Pac-12, here's the Mountain West.
Right.
Still, the Mountain West a little bit farther away, but because like you said, more newcomers, more question marks, whatever. But I think there needs to be a serious conversation at the end of the season if they are closer than we imagine as to who really could take the cake on that one. And it's just a
Right.
matter of time and figuring it out. But I truly do believe the mid-major level of college football will be a really, really fun watch this year. 100%.
Well, and I think like people obviously have to look at it too as when it comes to these group of six schools, obviously it's handled differently when it gets to CFP time than the Power Four schools. So obviously, you're going to have the Memphis and the Boise State and the UNLV, all the top schools from each conference, but they themselves are going to be kind of fighting it out, for who wants to take that spot or two in the college football playoff. Um, so it's more of like, and it's hard to compare, like we said, and you're really not going to know that until once you get to that point, I feel like. And I feel like that is when you really get to say, hey, this conference had the edge because it came down to it was a literal head-to-head matchup, whether it was literally or figuratively in terms of whether they actually played against each other or they just had to fight each other for that playoff spot. And I think that obviously that comes with whether how their schedules are, especially the non-conference games, who they're playing in those first couple games. But that's just it. Obviously, it's going to be a lot more waiting until you can see where when it comes down to the crunch time and when it comes down to these teams having to fight for that one playoff spot, then that's I feel like when you're going to have a better sense of how the conference is, especially because um, it's easier to judge, I would say, based on the conference schedule. Once for a Mountain West team, the talent in terms of the schools and the competition may not be as strong as what the American is seeing, right, in your conference games. And so UNLV could go and win 7 games, 8 games, whatever in the conference. Cool. But which one, how many of those teams were competitive? How many of those teams had winning records? You look at the American, how many of those teams that they played had winning records? It's probably more. But then at the same token, it's okay, you can look at the strength of schedule, but then once you get to that playoff point, maybe UNLV is the better team overall compared to a school like Memphis. But then they just had the disadvantage of playing in a weaker conference. Doesn't mean they themselves are the weaker school and they kind of fit that same category, but it's more of just you kind of have to wait for these individual teams within each conference to kind of sprout themselves, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. And that was going to be my next point was like, we're talking about the top tier because that's what's going to be evaluated nationally and
Yeah.
everything. But realistically speaking, we got to talk about the bottom tier schools too.
Hmm.
You got to talk about, again, going into this season with projections, not saying they're going to be worse or not, but for the Pac 12, that would be like your Colorado States, your, and like a couple others in the Pac 12. I can't think of anything other than Colorado State because I think most, if not all, are projected at least like 5 or 6 wins.
Hmm.
Um, then you look at the
Like you
Mountain
probably have
West,
like
like we
Fresno
said,
State up there, like Fresno State's probably up there, Texas State's probably up there, I'd imagine.
yeah, in terms of like win count and
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
as
yeah.
well. Because I know like Brad Johnson, like we talked about him last week, he's just a freaking
Hmm.
dog right now.
Right.
So we'll see what that happens. But like, so you got to evaluate the lower tier with the Pac-12. You got to evaluate the lower tier with the Mountain West, which
Hmm.
projected right now is like UTEP, NIU, Nevada, SJSU. Like you really got to see what these schools will do in comparison to the American lower tier schools.
Yep.
And it's just this is where like you're only as good as your weakest link kind of situation kind of pops up.
Yeah.
And as long as either conference, Pac-12 or Mountain West, can actually produce, multiple lower tier, like 4 or 5 win teams, that's still really good for them this year. You know, because
Hmm.
the Mountain West had so many programs that would have like one conference win and have like 3 wins last year, including Nevada. But they had 2 conference wins. The Pac-12 now has a couple of those in like Colorado State, like I was mentioning earlier. And it's just you need to find that balance while also maintaining that national attention for your top schools. And
Right.
so again, Americans coming into it with the biggest lead into this now. It's just a
Hmm.
matter of seeing if the top tier schools and the bottom tier schools can really do anything, any magic during that time. And I'm confident that both conferences can do it. It's a matter of will they, like you were talking about. It's a matter of
Yeah.
like week 6, week 7, how are we going to come in and really evaluate all this stuff? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it is what it is.
And I think that
Uh,
kind of, I mean, we were already touching on it anyway, but just looking into with fall camp starting soon, like you said, which school is going to start on the right foot, wrong foot. I guess we could kind of look at from each conference the one that's, I guess we kind of project that is most likely going to be the top spearhead coming out of fall camp, maybe a dark horse that we think it's going to be. So I guess if you want to start with the Pac-12, like I said, we were already kind of talking, we were leading into that anyway, but I think looking at each conference, we can kind of divvy that up.
no, 100%. I can do that right now. Let me look up this. If I were a betting man, realistically speaking, I would, and again, just going off of last year, going off of like FanDuel projections and a bunch of other stuff. If we're talking about schools that should get on the right foot, at least Pac-12 wise, should be schools like Texas State, Boise State, and realistically, I guess the next one after that would be either like a SDSU or like a Fresno State.
Hmm.
I would have to still like let me go peek at their conference schedule because that will tell me a lot more. So like for example, Fresno State in week 1 will play USC.
Right.
Ow. Sorry, like I think USC opens with I know they opened San Jose State week 0 and now they play Fresno State week 1, so like ow.
Back to
Good
back.
California tour but still.
Hmm.
Uh with Boise you have Oregon again. Ow. Texas State, Texas. I can keep saying it.
Yeah.
But you know, the two schools that really could get on the right foot quicker than others would be Utah State, who's playing
Hmm.
Idaho State, and San Diego State, who's playing Portland State. It's just a lot of states. I swear to God, it's going to be the Pac State Conference at one point, unless they add more schools. I swear to
That's
God.
pretty much what it is.
Um, it is. Every single school is a blank state school.
Hmm.
So we'll see what happens when if slash when they add more members. Um, but and then like you have Washington State who plays the Sunday, so September 6th. They play Washington in the Apple Cup, which again, ow, like this is
Yeah.
just gonna be a really like struggle to get going because you have your like you know your damn near blue chip or blue blood um like power 4 conference opponent to start,
Hmm.
and then it's just a matter of like who could fit in where. Because like the next week after that, in week 2, it's Colorado State plays Southern Utah. Washington State plays Kansas State, which is still going to be a tough game, but still. Texas State plays UTSA. Boise plays Memphis. Fresno plays Sac State. So it's just a matter of. I realistically think out of these schedules, we're going to see early on, unless catastrophe happens, like a Utah State. They're playing Washington week 2. It's going to be kind of tough, but we'll see a Utah State pop up with a win there. We'll see Colorado State maybe walk away with 2 because they play Wyoming and then Southern Utah. So
Hmm.
that could be something if they revamp themselves really quickly. And again, SDSU they play UCLA in week 2. So again, FCS Power 4. We'll see how things go there, but it's realistically like you're gonna still expect like Texas State, Boise State to kind of run away with this and make it closer games against the Power 4 schools.
Right.
But in the end, like it really comes down to okay, who's week 3 and like week 3 for forward. Okay, we got the rust off. We kind of got kicked in the teeth a little bit.
Hmm.
Let's see what we can do from there. And
Yeah.
so like again. Boise, Texas for sure in my eyes. And it's just a matter of the third one can be a random assortment of like four different schools.
Yeah. And I think it's same thing with the Mountain West too. Like I'll look at that one. The way I was kind of looking at it too was more of uh it's hard to say momentum going into last year because just teams change so much after every year with the portal and everything. Um, but I think that you're going to see a lot more, uh, like kind of how we saw a fight last year among, it was obviously Boise State at the top, and then you had all those schools that were finishing with, around the 9-win mark and all kind of fighting for that last spot. And then which it obviously came down to a couple being tied conference wise. But I think team I'm most excited to see, at least coming out of the Mountain West, I would have to say is New Mexico. And I feel like a lot of people tend to, I don't want to say undermine them, but I think a lot of people get sidetracked on, UNLV, UNLV, UNLV. They brought in a former Power Four quarterback. They already had a bunch of talent from last year. They were already kind of top two behind Boise State, so it's easy to just slide them in. Um, but I think the fact that you see what Jason Eck has done with that program and how much he's grown them in the short span. And I think that now going into camp and now that they see that I would I would want to say have a much more open window when it comes to taking that top conference spot. Um, I think that leaves a big chip on their shoulder, and I think that they, even though they already kind of proved themselves a little bit last year, that they're on the up and come, that they have to continue doing that because, like I said, everyone's looking at UNLV. People are looking at Hawaii because of the quarterback. People are looking at NDSU because it's NDSU, their success at the FCS level. I feel like a lot of these other teams you're seeing in headlines a lot, but New Mexico is still kind of getting pushed aside when I feel like
Mm-hmm.
they shouldn't be. I'm sure you would agree on that, but it's just one of those things where those are one of the schools I feel like they have all the confidence, everything on top of them, right? So now it's just, and you have to feel good going into fall camp and then coming out of fall camp going into the season. Feel like you have to have your head up kind of high.
Oh, 100%. I view in similar lights, not the exact same lights, but in similar lights, I view New Mexico and Texas State in the exact same position,
Mm-hmm.
where it's you got good players, you got amazing reputation builder, especially from last year. It may not have been the spectacle you were looking for
Yeah.
um, at the end of the season, but at the end of the day, you have a good reputation moving into your next year, whether you are in a new conference and you're a returner, or you're just in a brand new conference in and of itself, basically. Uh, and there's a lot, like you said, there's a whole bag of Frito Lays on their damn shoulders. There
Yeah.
should be at least.
Mm-hmm.
Like it should be like these schools should look at everybody and say, "Oh, Texas State, Boise State is projected to win everything.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go take them down a notch."
Yeah.
Or, "Hey, we're not even the second best," or they might be. I forget exactly what their win total is. I want to say it's like 6.5 to 7.5. It's somewhere in
Mm-hmm.
that range. I know that.
Yeah.
Um, but I know SDSU is either projected the same, if not higher. So it's like, okay, cool. So they think we're not even the second best. We're not even going to get into the conference championship game. Let's
Yeah.
go take them down a peg too. Same thing with New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
UNLV's top dog. Hawaii and NDSU are two schools that are projected to be better than us.
Yeah.
Let's go take them down a couple pegs. Let's go
Right.
have fun with them and let's go prove that we're here. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's just kind of like going into the first part of our podcast here. Like that's exactly what we need from these two conferences in every single level,
Yeah.
And so if they can continue to build that, if they do have that chip on their shoulder or the bag, whatever metaphor you want to go with, um, and they continue to build that momentum from last season from there,
Yeah.
they shouldn't have any problem contending. It's just a matter of
Mm-hmm.
can they squeak out those tougher wins where UNLV, Boise State, NDSU/Hawaii, and SDSU/Fresno even sometimes too. I'm not too sure how they compare, but still, um, all these schools are already projected better than you. Let's
Yeah.
go see what you can do.
No, exactly. And I think it's
So,
just heading into it. I think it's like you said, it's more of um, and kind of how I referenced at the beginning, like it's I don't want to say a trial run because obviously most of these schools have already seen each other to begin with, but it's more of you place them in a new conference, everything changes no matter how many of the same schools come with you. So I think it's a more of um, like any other conference realignment. You really have to take uh be patient with both positive and negative feedback until you really see how um, these schools play out in that conference. And even then, it's even after the first year, it's hard to really look at it. Like you really have to see because obviously not all these schools, like Nevada, for example, they're going to play some of these new schools on the road, or vice versa. They're going to play them at home. And then, but they're going to have to wait until next year to play the opposite, right? They could play some of these schools at home and do fine. But then once you have to go into some of these new environments that they're not used to next year come around, and then you're really going to see, okay, how well am I actually going to match up against these new schools, so you it's hard to tell. Obviously, that's going to be the case for any situation, but I think um like I said, that's the biggest thing, at least on my end, is seeing how much forward momentum you had in the previous year, and now that, especially for the Mountain West, I think it's a little bit easier to say it's a lot more wide open than the Pac-12 because there's already some expectations, I feel like, with so many of those schools. But the Mountain West, you really don't know who's going to be opened up.
Exactly. You can only predict and try to even see into the friggin' crystal ball and be like, all right, who's gonna
Yeah,
get this? And you
right.
never know what's gonna happen with this one. So,
Exactly.
but that's like, as much as I don't like conference alignment, that's the beauty of it. It's a new
Hmm.
conference, it's new storylines, it's new everything, and it's,
Yeah.
as a journalist it makes it fun. As a fan it gets a little confusing, but still.
Yeah.
So,
Adds to it.
but exactly. So I'm looking forward to seeing how all those schools do. Realistically, it should be fun non-conference, and then we'll
Yeah.
see if the cannibalistic, or not cannibalistic, the self, um, not doubt, but you know what I'm trying to say, like where the
Hmm.
top schools just don't perform the way they should and everything.
Yeah.
And just to see if that happens again, because that was a trend that we saw in the Mountain West last year, and that was multiple schools. So it should be a fun football season to kick off new conferences.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
should be a very fun time. So,
Hmm.
alrighty, well, we kind of hit two birds in one stone with that one, so I kind of like that a lot. I like that a lot. So we'll move on to our final segment of today, which will be the Pac-12 and Mountain West basketball brackets. So as I mentioned in the opener, the Mountain West and Pac-12 had released new men's and women's basketball brackets for the conference tournament. Obviously, that will be in March, so it's a way longer time, but it just came out, so we're going to talk about it. It's going to be fun. Um, just to kind of give a little brief rundown, the Pac-12 has 9 members. It's all football members plus Gonzaga. They will have a playing game between the 8 and 9 seed on the first day, and then it'll operate just like any other uh, or any Mountain West tournament that you have viewed before, where it's like 5 plays X, 6 plays 7 or whatever, and then they go into the quarterfinals where the top schools will play. The Mountain West has changed for their 10 members. They now have 2 playing games. It's the 7 versus 10 seed and 8 versus 9 seeds. The rest will have buys, so now we have 6 buys in the tournament, and it'll just continue as everybody else or every other tournament has happened in the past. The big thing from the Pac-12 was they announced where it's going to be played for the next 2 seasons, so 2027 and 2028, which will be the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas. And they will run basically the exact same time of each other. The Mountain West will run from March 7th to 13th, and with the women starting for the first couple days, and then the men finishing it on the last 3. The Pac-12 will do sort of like a mixed situation where they are going to be playing from the 9th of March to the 13th, and they'll kind of have games throughout the day, both women's and men's, from what it's seeming like, because both games are going to be played on March 13th, or the championship games are going to be played on March 13th. So various different stuff there. Realistically speaking, this should be a fun sort of mix. It's just readjusting for the Mountain West. Realistically, it's not anything of that stuff, in my opinion. I'll let Dom take the floor on the first part here. But just overall, like, what are your vibes towards it, my friend?
Well, and I want to point out, not to blast you on air or anything, but just adding a couple things from those two
Yeah,
brackets. With the Pac-12 specifically, the biggest thing is the first and second seeds getting a double bye. So they're not playing until their first game isn't until the semifinals. So it's forcing all those other teams to come in to them. And then same, not it's not as the same as Mountain West. Mountain West, obviously, like you said, with those two playing games in the first round compared to instead of everyone playing, um, like how it was last year. You had it was just what the two schools on a bye, or no, it was the top three
it was
schools on a
4
bye.
on a bye.
Was it four? Okay, yeah,
I believe it was 4,
um,
yeah, because it was three
yeah.
playing games, and then they had all, yeah, it was 4 schools on
hmm
the bye.
Yeah, so now, yeah, obviously this is the first round. It's shortened a little bit, so you have more teams starting out in the quarterfinals. And then, like I said, obviously with the Pac-12, you have more games for the lower seeds, but then those higher seeds, you have them waiting a little bit, like because for the 3 and 4 seed in the Pac-12, they're not playing their first games not till the quarterfinal, so they technically skip over 1 to 2 games. Same thing with the 1 and 2 seed, they're skipping over 2 to 3 games, and then all they have to do is win 2 games to win the championship compared to say the number 8 seed in the Pac-12 who has to now win 5 games.
Yeah,
um, I think the biggest thing with that, and I guess it's a little bit of my personal opinion as well, but I know there's a lot of back and forth. I feel like with a lot of these kinds of schedules or brackets, if you will, is it kind of takes away that, I don't want to say Cinderella dynamic, but it just, it caters to your higher seeds, obviously, which obviously, to play devil's advocate is a good thing for the top seeds, and then it kind of puts a little bit more weight on your conference games because now you're really focused in on, okay, if I don't want to play 3 extra games just to get to the championship, then we need to play better and win more games during the conference, right? Obviously, the conference games were important no matter what, but with the way it changes now, it just adds more weight to want to be the higher seed, right? Because if you're Boise State basketball and you fight and are the number 1 seed, well, guess what? Now you only have to play 1 game. You win that game, you're already in the championship. Compared to if Utah State, for some reason, finishes as the number 9 seed, right? Now you have to play the play-in game, and then you got to go through 3 rounds before you can even get there. And I think like this was something you and I talked about last year when we were at the Mountain West Championships, down in Vegas, was just how hard it is to begin with for some of those teams that aren't among the top that get that extra bye. Because you look at a school like Nevada last year, who, if they wanted to win the championship, they had to play what? It was 4 games in 4 days, right? Or 5 games in 5 days.
I want to say it was 4 and 4 because it was Air Force, GCU, and then winner of like Utah State
Utah,
and whoever they
yeah,
received that, and then the championship. Yeah,
yeah. So obviously, like, and it was a similar thing, and you see that because they finished just under the threshold to get the bye, that then they had to play that extra game, and um, granted, it was a little bit more fair, I'd say, just because less teams had a bye. And even if you were one of those top 4 that didn't have to play that first round, you're still playing back to back to back games. Um, but you just obviously, there's a lot more, even with that, and someone like Coach Alford even mentioned it after the season was over, that just how hard it is to win that many consecutive games, especially when in college basketball or in basketball in general, you're not used to that. You're not playing games every single day back to back to back like that. So no matter how great of an athlete you are, that's a lot. So I think in that aspect, especially with the Pac-12, because of how little the top seeds have to play, like I said, there's the pros and cons to it, and you can play devil's advocate for hours about whether it's good or bad or not. Like I said, it's hard because you want to see more games, and by the time that 8 seed, even if they make it all the way to the semifinal to play that 1 seed, they might have some advantage, obviously, because they've been playing. But then at the same time, you're gassed from playing. You play March 9th, you play March 10th, you play March 11th, now March 12th. You're playing a semifinal game with that number 1 seed who has been nothing but practicing and watching you play those first 3 days. You're going to be gassed. You're going to be at an advantage because they've been seeing how you're running in the tournament for 3 days. So, like I said, it creates more of an incentive to, if you want a better chance of winning the championship, you better finish high. But at the same time, um, I feel like it's just harder to see some of these lower teams kind of jump out of nowhere and take the whole thing.
I think the biggest thing that worries me about the Pac-12 bracket is not even necessarily like the top schools getting rest or anything. It's the like mid to like lower on the bracket.
Hmm.
Those schools using their best games on the wrong schools,
Right.
right? So it's not even about gas. It's not about any of that stuff. Like, because we saw that at the tournament this year where Nevada dropped like a 30, 40 point win against Air Force
Hmm.
in the conference tournament to start the whole thing off for them. They even had their walk on come in, who's a cool dude. I love him. But like, I'm happy he got the time in and everything. But like, say you use that type of momentum against Utah State,
Yeah.
and then you play the Utah State game, like and then you play your same stuff and everything against Utah State that you do against Air Force. There might have been a time where Nevada was in the championship,
Right.
and they would have been like a 1 seed in the NIT or whatever, or just one of the last couple of schools in. I don't think that's actually the case on the last part, but still. So like there's so many variables that play into it when you like you were saying when you play that many games. And when you use the when you use the wrong set of like momentum, skills, preparation, all that kind of stuff and everything, the whole kit on a school like, hey, I'm just trying to get it to the next round. And
Yeah.
then you have another school who's already seen you play twice, if not, however many times. You get it's really tricky to play that like the basketball game of chess kind of that way, you know what I'm saying, or the chess game of basketball, whatever, like
Yeah.
you cannot, it's really really hard to predict that. And so you never know who's going to have a bad game, you never know who's going to step up out of nowhere, any of that things. So it's just like that's my main concern about the Pac-12 tournament is you have all these things happening all at once. You have all these games happening all at once because both tournaments are happening within those 4 days, both men's and women's. And it's just so hard to predict everything. And if you truly want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, like that's where I think the Mountain West bracket does better.
Hmm.
Is you only have a couple teams getting or like where you have like most of the conference getting a bye. Like your
Right.
only schools that's gonna have to play in the first day are your bottom four schools, and those two will directly feed the top two seeds, while the other two schools actually have time to prepare, so that like more time to prepare, so that way they can be. It's actually fun games to play at the same time, because that's
Exactly.
another aspect of it that most of us don't think about is the viewership,
Yeah.
right? Like, don't get me wrong, for a Nevada fan, the Air Force game was great, but that would have been a lot better of a game if you swap the Air Force and Utah State performances,
Hmm.
So it's just like, would it have pissed off the fan base and pissed off probably some people in athletics? Probably, because why are you that close to Air Force? But
Right.
like, regardless, and I mean Air Force last year, no dig to the Falcons, they're cool people. Um, but I'm covering my butt. I'm making sure I don't get a fan base angry at me.
Yeah.
But no, it's like that's some real stuff there. It's a matter of like you need to be able to cash in those games when necessary. And when you have all those variables, it's really really tricky to know like when you're going to be pushing your chips all in and when you're only going to be doing the small bet and
Right.
then just checking the entire time. So
Exactly.
that's a Vegas analogy right there, because they're going to be playing in Vegas. There you go.
Yeah. There you go.
So I tried to do something sneaky. I tried to do it. You gotta have fun here on the podcast. No.
Right.
But yeah, no. So it's just, I'm hopeful that things will actually, sort themselves out pretty well.
Hmm.
Because again, the other draw side of that is your top schools are only preparing.
Yeah.
They're not actually running games, which in a scenario like that can catch you on the bad foot. We saw that again, Mountain West tournament last year, or last athletic year.
Yeah.
Um, we who was it? The two upsets in the first round. It was San Jose beat Boise.
Hmm.
And I don't think there's another upset actually. I think yeah, because UNLV almost lost to Wyoming.
Yeah. It was.
So yeah, so like those two games, like obviously one was a predicted outcome, but was closer than expected. The other one was an actual upset, but that could be even a worst case scenario. Say we'll just kind of rattle it off: Gonzaga and Utah State being top two seeds. I You have to kind of see like, okay, cool, are they actually going to be able to get off on the right foot, or will they be put in a 10, 12, 14 point hole early because the school that's played two or three games has already like prepared, they know what they're doing, they know all the stuff they're going on, and they're just kind of doing repetition from there because they're already so warmed up,
Right.
so there's too many variables that kind of play into the Pac-12 one that kind of just makes it like chaotic, and depending on how you view that, very fun.
Hmm.
But from there, it's just like, okay, cool. You got one structure that you can definitely see more like, I'm not saying consistency, but you can see a more level playing field when it comes to time off.
Yeah.
Versus the other one, it's very like, hey, you got two schools that did really well this year. They're going to be sitting on the court side watching the first two games, and then
Exactly.
they're going to do what they can from there.
Hmm.
And we'll just have to see how that pans out. I think there is a world, and like in the multiverse, I guess, there's a timeline where every single year we see a mix of like Gonzaga, Utah State, Boise State, SDSU, especially like any of those four mixes of schools being the top schools and consistently winning.
Yeah.
And I see another timeline where they get caught completely like, hands in pockets, nothing going on, and they get actually upset, and then that ruins their chances at an NCAA bid.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to see kind of what happens with it. I think there is, again, we're talking about stuff that's going to happen in like what, dang near what, August. We're like 7 months away.
Yeah.
Like
Got a while.
it's almost football season. I just thought it'd
Yeah.
be, the brackets
Hmm.
just came out. It'd be fun to talk about, but it's like, this
Right.
is still interesting things that you kind of have to consider as
Hmm.
a Pac-12 school now.
Yeah. Well, like I said, especially with conference realignment, like it's important. Like you have to think ahead of these things now as a school, and um, like I said, it carries more weight now on And granted, the schedules are going to be coming out soon anyway, and all that. But um, like I said, now it's just it kind of as practices start and those teams are getting together again. That first kind of meeting you have with the players and everything as a coach, now you kind of just have to put a different emphasis on, hey, conference games were already extremely important to begin with, but now this is what the tournament bracket looks like. And if unless you want to be playing that many games in a row again and already have a disadvantage against the top two seeds who they're all ready to go and they've been resting all week, if you don't want to be that case, then you better bust your butt and win some more games in that conference schedule because, like I said, if you want to get that top slot, you got to put a lot more emphasis on making sure those are the games you're winning.
Not to mention how many like tier one
Hmm.
games you're going to play now. Like
Yep.
those, on top of the fact that those carry national notoriety, especially in conference play where there's so very little depending on your conference.
Yeah.
Now it's just even like, hey, it's a Q1 game. On top of this game might dictate whether or not we play 4 games or 2 games.
Yep.
Let's
Exactly.
see how we do, gentlemen,
Hmm.
or ladies, and we'll
Yep.
kind of just go from there. So I
Yep.
don't know. It is going to be a question mark filled season. And realistically, I don't know if the bracket will change either during the 2 year agreement that the Pac 12 has, or even the 2 year or the whatever agreement that the Mountain West has currently with Thomas and Mack Center,
Right.
or whether they will change up, whether they'll do different things. Like I know the Gonzaga's coming from the West Coast Conference, which had a way different bracket style than any of these two were.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, again, you're going to have to adapt and overcome, but it's a matter of how much will that actually factor in a year from now, in 2 years from now, in 5 years from now, because all those TV deals will come up, and you, again, like you said, conference realignment.
Yep.
So it's, I wish there wasn't this many, but again, like we still have 7 months until that happens.
Yeah.
And once Saturday rolls around, we'll have 2 months until like the real conversations about college basketball start up again.
Yep.
So it's gonna, we can only kind of sit here and ponder for a little bit, but then once we would get that kind of like the steamroller kind of rolling and everything, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's when you'll start to see like, okay, like this coach don't like this bracket, but this coach does, and you can kind
Yeah,
of see the party
exactly.
lines kind of get drawn.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
it will be fun to cover that as well.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
amen. So alrighty, well I think that's about it for today. Dom, thank you so much for joining me once again. This was a hell of a lot of fun. Welcome
Yep.
back. Uh, to everybody watching, again, thank you so very much for listening. Uh, if you want to check out more of our content, whether that be on Twitter, whether it be on our website, check out the bottom ticker right below us down there on Twitter/X Mountain West Conference MWC Connection, and then our website is www.mwcconnection.com. It literally will pop up in like 30 seconds, and I want to make sure it kind of stays. So if you need a visual, it's right below me. Uh, but yeah, thank you so very much for listening. If we missed anything, please feel free to comment that down below, and maybe we'll get to it next week. So, but
Yep.
I hope you enjoy the rest of your days and your weeks, your weekends. I'm a huge wrestling fan, so I'm gonna definitely have fun with SummerSlam this weekend. If anybody's a wrestling fan, comment down below too, because I want to hear your takes. Um, and we'll see y'all next week. So
Yep.
take care, everybody. Thank you so very much for listening.
Thank you.